Um, Maybe we'll get some more people coming in as we go along. Um, so yeah, and we're recording this, so just to let everyone know, and we can move to the next slide. Okay, so here's our agenda for tonight. We'll do a quick introduction to the mobilizing team and why these topics are important to us. And then the Urban Garden Initiative will speak, and then Aryana Solutions will speak. And then we'll have an audience Q&A. And you can write, if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat or on a piece of paper and write them later on. And then we'll do a little introduction to our action toolkit, which we'll put in an email, a follow-up email, maybe tomorrow, I think. So this has been organized by the Youth-Led Mobilizing Team, and we are under the umbrella of 350.org and locally the 350 Bay Area chapter. And so we provide a space for young people to take meaningful climate action and also give them the platform to move into leadership roles and mobilize actions that are specifically important to them, environmental actions. So we do a variety of campaigns, both in person. We had a demonstration today for stopping the Line 3 pipeline in San Francisco. And we also have online actions like our power hours and the most recent 46 Days of Action campaign. So if you're interested in joining, you can chat me on Zoom or email me, and my email will be on a later slide.
All right, so now we're going to transition to why we're here today and why is it important that we even learn about this stuff. So probably the most well-known issue that comes to mind is food access, and a lot of people are actually going hungry, unfortunately. That's a total of 690 million people that are still hungry, even though we produce enough food for 10 billion people to live on this planet. Next slide. Another major issue kind of connected to that, but more usually in urban areas, is the lack of nutritional food, causing major health crises. And just so we have an understanding, this picture is basically stating what is a food desert. And a food desert by definition is when somebody in urban areas living more than 1 mile away from their nearest grocery store, which is a big issue because if people don't have access to healthy food options, then it's going to create deep inequalities. Next slide. Another big issue is using CAFOs, which stands for Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations. These CAFOs oftentimes create huge amounts of emissions of CO2 and methane, as well as creating major health issues as well. So, next slide. And I would say probably the biggest issue of overall across the planet is how we use the planet and overuse and abuse the natural resources and services that are provided to us, including water, land, and pollination from bees, and so many other issues as well. Next slide, please. And that works in tandem with my next topic here, which is working with nature rather than against it. We should be trying to create solutions that are good for the environment as well as our economy. While that should also include our infrastructure like this picture. Next slide. Lastly, but definitely not least, we need to be helping to solve injustices and helping all communities to make sure that they are able to feed themselves, to create strong businesses, and to fight racial injustice as well as the many other injustices that are going on right now. All right, next slide.
Awesome. So before I introduce our first speaker, I just wanted to share a little bit about why this is important to us on the Mobilizing team and why we wanted to bring this event to you all. So as young people, we have a vested interest in the effects that our current food system will have on our environment and the ramifications of food inequality in our communities. We will inevitably inherit these consequences, and we want to use our voices to create the change that we want to see. So in this way, we're hoping to use our platform to amplify the works of groups directly working to help combat or help communities implement sustainable practices and combat food insecurity through urban gardening. Lily, Ava, and I, who put this event together, all felt passionate about bringing this subject to you all and know that we can each do our part to make a positive impact. So we hope that you come out of this with some more knowledge and motivation to take action. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Megan, Priya, and Helena from the Urban Garden Initiative.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and start our presentation real quick. So I can go ahead and share my screen.
We can start off as well. We're going to give a little bit of intro about Tugi, but just about our role. So my name is Megan. I'm currently actually in Delaware, so not in the Bay Area, but we do a lot of work there. And I'm the director at the Urban Garden Initiative.
And my name is Priya. I am the director of programming here at Tugi, and I'm also in Delaware, actually.
And I'm Helena. I'm the associate director of programming, and I'm the only one that's actually from the Bay Area. I'm from the East Bay.
Yep. So we're going to get started just telling you guys a little bit more about Tugi and the work that we do before diving more into our main topic today, which is all about the relationship between food sustainability and the larger topic of climate change. So to get started, the Urban Garden Initiative is an international 501c3 nonprofit that aims to inspire and empower youth to achieve urban sustainability through a gardening-based program. So what does that look like? That looks like a lot of educational programs. It looks like us creating tangible solutions within communities to really create more sustainable food systems, really allowing young people to become the forefront of what's going on when it comes to bringing access to various healthy food in a lot of cities that we work within, and also just creating larger environmental efforts in general, which I think aligns a lot with what 350 does as well in terms of just larger environmental solutions that young people can get involved in. So we got started as shown by where Priya and I are, right in Wilmington, Delaware, which is known to be a really major food desert. And from that point onwards, we've just been able to expand a lot. And you guys can see from our map just a little bit of our impact. So at this point, we are actually at over 60 chapters around the world, around, I would say around 30 to 40 just within the US and many other countries, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Philippines, and more. We've been able to actually work with over 10,000 students at this point through a lot of the different efforts and workshops and programs and gardens that we are able to build. And we've also been able to work with volunteers of all different ages and all different backgrounds all around the world as well. So if that becomes something after we give our presentation, you're more interested in getting involved with Tugi as well, we will share that at the end. So we're actually going to get started by just watching this really quick video. It's only 2 minutes, and I think it's really impactful, all about climate change and food.
One of the mistakes people make about climate change is saying that the planet is at stake.
Is it the last chance to save the planet from climate change?
Tens of thousands of activists warning climate change is destroying the Earth.
Biggest cause in Hollywood is saving the Earth. You know, climate change and all that.
That's not really the right way to think about it. Earth has gone through immense climate changes many, many times before, in some cases leading to mass extinctions. But life persisted. Mammals evolved from reptiles and primates from mammals. They stood up and walked out of Africa, eventually reaching the corners of every continent. But only after well over 100,000 years of wandering did the real human innovation happen, when 12,000 years ago we stopped foraging and started farming. Agriculture meant villages, cities, society, government, the birth of civilization. But why did it take so long for humans to take control of their food? Well, if you look at this chart of global temperature change going back 100,000 years, you might notice something special about the last 10,000 years. That's when the climate settled into a period of unusual stability. It was on this ledge that human society developed, where reliable seasons fed more and more people, where knowledge accumulated and science began, until eventually inventors created machines that could unleash unimaginable growth and mobility. All they needed was fuel to burn, and they found it in the form of ancient forests, buried under dirt and compacted over 300 million years. With these coal deposits, humans unearthed tons and tons of carbon that had been locked away long before our species appeared. And that's how we began to disrupt the climate that birthed us, the climate that our food systems and infrastructure are built upon. After 10,000 years of temperatures that varied only within about 1 degree Celsius, scientists now say we're on track for 3 degrees of warming by the end of the century if we don't change course. Humans have been around for 0.004% of Earth's history, and of all of human history, the 200,000 years since our species began, we've had agriculture for just 5% of that time. We've had electricity for 0.07% of that time. The simple truth about climate change is that it isn't new to the planet, but civilization is. And here's what's even newer. In the past 100 years, the number of people alive has quadrupled, and thus so has the capacity for suffering. So slowing down climate change isn't about saving the planet, it's about us, about our vulnerability to a level of climate disruption that human civilization has simply never seen before.
Okay. We just wanted to share that video because it's a really good explanation of, first of all, just what climate change is, and it just it puts things in a little bit more perspective, because I think when you think back to human civilization, you don't really think back as far as this video goes out to. So I'm sure everyone here has a pretty good understanding of what climate change is by now. But just to reiterate, climate change is any significant change in average weather, which is weather for the entire planet or the climate over a significant period of time. So it's not just like daily weather changes, it's for a long period of time. And these abnormal variations with the climate have a lot of negative effects on the planet. And again, I'm sure everyone here is also pretty knowledgeable on the reasons for climate change, but the three main reasons are really from burning fossil fuels, because as you burn these fuels, they release greenhouse gases, which then contributes to the greenhouse effects, causing our entire planet to warm up. And then deforestation is also a really huge reason for climate change, because trees actually hold a lot of carbon dioxide. I know when you think about deforestation, you think it's really problematic because plants take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. And when you cut down trees, it disrupts that cycle. While that is really problematic, trees also hold a lot of carbon dioxide in them. So when you cut them down and burn them or use them somehow, all of that carbon dioxide is being released. And then the last one, of course, human activity also contributes to climate change. What type of car you drive, where you get your food from, all of it contributes to your carbon footprint and how much greenhouse gases you're releasing, which then contributes to climate change. And we could go on and on about the results of climate change, but today specifically, we're going to be focusing on food, because climate change has a really major impact on agriculture, and it makes it a lot harder to grow food and access food, which is what we're going to be going into today.
So in a normal,
Megan,
in a normal setting, I think when we have a little bit more time, we might play this game. But since we have a smaller audience today, I think it might not translate as well. So I think we can just like skip over the entirety of the game. But in short, we are going to dive right into kind of talking about food deserts and kind of what it entails, and I think what some of the common misconceptions are. So in short, food deserts are geographical areas where residents have really limited access to healthy and affordable food options. And I think oftentimes we have this idea that it has to only be in urban areas, although we're going to talk about later today more specific local examples of how it can be in a lot of different environments. It can be in urban settings, which is most commonly kind of where you see it. It can also be in largely rural areas where you have to drive 10, 15 miles out in order to be able to access healthy food. And part of the reason that Toolkit was started is that I live, I would say, approximately 20, 25 minutes away from a pretty major food desert in my community. And especially in urban versus rural areas, they present their own kind of challenges. So when you're in an urban area, of course, it's you don't have a car. So a lot of times, actually 2 miles outside of where everybody is kind of living, if there's not a close grocery store, that is considered a food desert versus 10 miles in a rural area. Um, you can see some of the different statistics that we have here that are kind of alarming, and just how it can really impact someone's life, as we can all imagine. And it's just a little bit crazy to think about that, especially when it comes to the United States. We imagine it as somewhere where everywhere is food secure. We're not dealing with the hunger issues that are happening in other countries, but in actuality, they are still going on.
Okay, and to get into the local examples of our food deserts, I'll be talking about Oakland and San Francisco specifically, and the entire cities aren't food deserts, and as you know, if you live in the Bay Area, these are really large cities, so the entire city isn't a food desert, but there are specific areas that are undeveloped and don't have a lot of supermarkets. And according to a study, only 10% of Bay Area households or 10% of Bay Area households have difficulty accessing fresh produce in their neighborhood, which is pretty surprising considering a lot of these cities that you go to, you see a lot of restaurants and you think, oh, they have access to food, and that's true. Um, but what a lot of these local residents call these areas because of that is they will call them food swamps, which are areas that have a lot of fast food restaurants and stores that sell processed food, but not as much fresh produce. So you'll see like fast food restaurants like McDonald's, and you'll see corner stores, but they won't sell any of the fresh produce that people need to really have a healthy diet. And in Oakland, especially in the flatlands area, and you can see on the map on the right, the flatlands are divided by IA-80, but in that area, there's only one supermarket for every about 93,000 residents, which is crazy to think about. And for 20 years in San Francisco and the Bayview area specifically, supermarket chains refused to operate there, and only recently, when Fresh and Easy opened in 2011, did supermarket chains actually start operating those areas. Okay, and a couple of the solutions that people have been approaching this problem with, this is one of the most obvious ones, but to build more supermarkets. So Community Foods Market was opened in West Oakland in the San Pablo Avenue. So if you live in the area, you might be familiar with this market, but it was opened just recently 2 years ago, but it was the first market in 50 years to be selling fresh produce in the West Oakland area. And obviously, all these local residents were really welcoming and they really liked it, and the business is going really well. And it's encouraging a lot of other grocery stores to reach out to these neglected areas and areas that have been previously undeveloped. And another program that has started on combating food insecurity is Bayview Heal Zone, and this is a community-based program. So it takes, sorry, my dog in the background. It takes into consideration a lot of different community leaders. So it's not funded by the city. It's really based in the community. It's a grassroots program and it focuses on combating specifically high rates of obesity and diabetes, which are really common among places that have food swamps, so a lot of fast food restaurants, but not a lot of fresh produce. And the last one that I'm going to talk about is Healthy Retail SF Pilot, and this is a city-funded program, and it helps corner stores remodel their stores so that they can sell more fresh produce. And as you can see on the picture on the right, a lot of these stores had like processed foods, things like instant ramen, things that you can't eat on a daily basis, and they replaced all of those with fresh produce. So this program, just to go over in general, just to go over it, is around $15,000 to $20,000 they'll give to stores for remodeling, and that'll cover the cost of marketing, developing, and computerizing their sales, giving refrigerators for the fresh produce to stay in. And if you're familiar with these areas, in the community groups in here, the Bayview and Tenderloin districts are run by Southeast Food Access and Tenderloin Healthy Core Store Coalition. So if you live in those areas, you might be familiar. And I'm not going to go over the list of converted stores, but they have about 10 or so stores that are converted, and the city program is still running. So I'm sure the list will be growing soon.
Yeah, and I'll just say before we entirely move on, just a couple of other solutions for people interested in other communities as well. Is I know here in Wilmington, like we recently just installed one of our first community fridges, which I know now is becoming more of like a national effort. But if you're not familiar with them, they're usually located at like Boys and Girls Clubs or sometimes schools as well. And they're just fridges stocked with healthy food that is entirely free and open to access for the community as long as you need it. So oftentimes community gardens will kind of stock some of those fridges. So that has also been an innovative solution people have been going about when it comes to food deserts. And of course, just in general, tied right into this, the increase of gardening, increase of kind of green space innovation and urban gardens in general in traditionally food desert areas. So again, in a more normal workshop setting, we'd love to follow almost like a little mini demonstration of starting your own container garden. We're just going to tell you guys some tips right now through this section, but we really encourage all of you guys to be able to start your own garden. If you have a larger space, create a larger garden. If not, container gardening, which is a way that we use a lot at Tugi. So as you guys can see from the name, it's very easy, it's portable. You can grow a lot of the plants depending on the size of container that you have. A lot of the same stuff you would grow traditionally right in the ground. And even in colder months, especially here on the East Coast, we can bring a lot of the plants inside. So we're gonna just really breeze through some of these tips, but a couple important things to keep note of. Make sure you have the right pot, both in terms of material, also in terms of size. I think, especially for beginner gardeners, that's something that a lot of times people make a mistake on, is just choosing a pot that's way too small, maybe fits the seedling when you first get it, but plants of course grow a lot if you give them the right care, and they need to be transplanted into larger pots as they get larger. And also ensuring that there's a hole or a couple of holes at the bottom of your pot to ensure drainage. Soil quality, NPK is kind of the rule of thumb, ensuring that you're using some type of gardening soil to begin with. And if it's not super high quality soil, fertilizing it with the right nutrients, and really ensuring different times you can see like different kind of plant markers when it comes to this disease. Sometimes it's due to a lack of phosphorus, for example, or this disease is due to too much nitrogen in the soil. So kind of keeping an eye out on your plant as to what nutrient they might be depleted in and kind of supplementing it with the right nutrient. And all the basic materials I'm sure all of you guys have. The only other thing that I would add on is that, especially for you guys that right now want to start gardening season, maybe you're starting some of your seedlings, always remember that you can also use recycled pots. I think that's a great way to also bring reducing, reusing, recycling into this whole topic of gardening as well. You don't have to buy everything from new. A lot of these things that you can just reuse from stuff that you already have and create a more sustainable garden to begin with. And just some final tips. We won't go too much in detail on those, but if you want to take a quick chance and take a look at some of these as well, just a couple final notes to take account of. All right, so I think kind of on timing, just wrapping up. So we hope that you guys learn a little bit about Tugi. And here's a slide that you guys can check out a little bit more about the work that we do, about how to get involved if you are interested, and check out some of the other garden-based projects and just food systems projects that we've been able to work on. And of course, if you're interested in volunteering, we have volunteering all around the world in various capacities. So check out our website and take a look at ways that you can get involved locally.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And just a reminder, if you have any questions for any of our speakers from Tugi, you can feel free to put them in the chat, or you can just keep them in mind for later when we have our Q&A. So next up, we have Katrina from Aryana Solutions, who will be sharing more about her and her organization with us.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. This is an excellent program and delighted to be part of it, and really appreciate the work that you all have been doing with 350 Bay Area and also with Tugi. I really enjoyed your presentation. There's lots of great tips and tricks, and really thrilled to hear about those retail stores bringing in more fresh foods. That's really progressive and great to see. So I'll share my screen now. Looks like it's on the wrong network. 1 second. See if we can share from there. That's strange. Having a little technical difficulty over here. I'm trying to share my screen, but it's not pulling from the right place. So I did send over my presentation.
Nick, I put it in the speaker notes, the link. Do you want us to share it, Katrina?
Maybe, yeah, because I'm not able to pull from the right place. It's looking like, I'm not sure. I haven't had this issue before. So I apologize for that.
No worries.
It should be popping up on the screen now, and I can just take cues from you if that works.
Yeah, if you want to put it in presentation view.
Yep, there we go.
Great, and while this is loading, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Katrina Zavalny, and I am an organization development consultant for nonprofits, and been doing community organizing and environmental work for 20 years now. And I founded my own nonprofit, Aryana Solutions, a couple years ago. And we started internationally, and I'll share some of those projects. And then we've been doing more locally, especially as COVID has been, keeping people at home. And so this has been a way for us to look at ways that we can support people and give them tools, much like what Tugi is doing, is really bring people back home to what they can do and grow and be sustainable from home. So our ultimate kind of work we do is helping communities be self-sustaining. Next slide. So Aryana as Solutions specializes in creating systematic place-based solutions, and we always work with the community where we're working with. We want to hear from them, so we always do a needs assessment and talk with the community, what's going on with them, what do they need, how can we work together, and create some systems and some trainings and some programs that will be supportive for them. We don't do handouts. We don't go in and just fix things for them. We work with them and usually use the philosophy of like, teach a person how to fish, and then they'll have the skills for life. Next slide. So what does Aryana mean? Why do we choose this term? Aryana means abundant forest in Sanskrit. And so with that, we have an ecological mindset where we really think and act like an ecosystem. We identify what are the levers for support that is really going to help these people in the communities fulfill the needs that they need. So we're like a bridge to resources and act like a little bee pollinating things and identifying and creating a web of support systems. Next slide. So the areas we work in, we started in Nepal, and then we started to work in Uganda and still working there. Very excited. I'll get into these a little bit. And then in the United States. And we started in 2018 with our first project. Next slide. So starting in the States, where we'll begin this journey, is working with Rotary as a way to work with and leverage an existing network that has multiple aspects to it. Rotary clubs have direct access and connection with the local communities. A lot of times they have initiatives and projects where they're providing support or funding or working with in partnership with local organizations and community initiatives. So there's that level. And then there's also like a district-wide level where clubs in a whole area can kind of get some direction and collaborate, work together to really leverage some change. And then on a much higher level, Rotary is an international organization. And so just this year, Rotary International has announced a 7th area of focus, which is protecting the environment. And so I'm personally thrilled, and thus we said, well, great, let's kickstart this by doing some Earth Day projects to really get things going. And our focus is on growing gardens. Next slide. And, we've already heard a lot from Tugi as well as 350 Bay Area, why this is important. So I'll just be brief as I go into this. Next slide. We know that there's a lot of issues, especially with climate on the rise. There's been a lot of forest fires, especially in Northern California, some in Oregon last year, Australia. I mean, the list goes on. There's been floods and drought and all sorts of things that the human civilization is both helping create as well as having to deal with. And so if we want to move forward on this planet in a healthy way, it's time for us to really start reckoning with that and finding healthier ways to live, including the marine life and the ocean life. We don't need a plastic soup in the ocean. Next slide. So we've identified a few different ways that people can act and work together on making some changes. The very first level is something anybody could do is on a personal level. And that is looking at a household level, individuals, families, growing a garden at home. So something that is just like, a very smaller scale, personal. And then we go to the next level, which is place. And that is like on a more regional level. So that's working with communities, schools, other clubs in the Rotary Network, but beyond just that, working with other nonprofits and organizations that are already doing this kind of work, such as Tugi. This would be a great opportunity to partner and collaborate and, looking on a regional scale of how can we really work with the communities to help them be self-sustaining. And then the third level is on a planetary level. And that is looking at what are the international projects people can get involved in, or what also are the networks that have far-reaching effects. So 350.org is a great example because that is like a huge network that's international and something that provides information and resources and as a way that can leverage to be able to impact many, many people utilizing that network. So thinking on a global scale. Next slide. So bringing it back home on, what are some tangible things? We kind of thought, well, what's a great way to work from the ground up and work with all generations, starting with the youth. So growing gardens, working with schools is something that is pretty simple and easy for people to get involved in, especially if they haven't been doing kind of environmental projects, or if they're not connected to where their food comes from, which honestly is quite the main reason for where I want to come from in working with this. Is a lot of people have can create the opportunity to be able to grow food from home. And so getting kids' hands dirty is a great opportunity to engage the schools and youth and different community members and families to this. Next slide. And as we have like this committee that's formed in Northern California, we've identified a few different ways of how people can go about this and getting involved in environmental projects. And as we've been talking about the different gardens and focusing on food security, as we were talking about, and as Tugi mentioned in their presentation, it can be from anything from a small container garden to using even a burlap sack to build something if you have an apartment and don't have somewhere you can actually like plant in the ground. There's also community gardens, there's schools you can partner with and garden, and you know, you can even go over to a friend's house and help them design a garden. I'm doing that myself, honestly. And so there's lots of different ways to do it. And just a quick little side note, there's different networks you can be part of to do gardens. And I was part of a time bank where we share our time as a resource, and we can trade things that way. And we had a group, a garden group, where we would go to one person's house once a month, and we would have like 10 of us just rock out and help them build out a garden or weed or plant things. It was great. And we'd recognize different skill sets within our community. Some people were good at designing and had permaculture backgrounds or agriculture backgrounds, or we could look at, well, what plants are going to go where and be companion plants and work best. And then we also had people who were just very hands-on, so they're great for the day of. And we'd always have a potluck where people would bring things that they were growing from home, and we'd be able to celebrate, you know, through food, breaking bread, and being able to just appreciate what's been growing in our own backyards, especially helped it grow. And that's a beautiful thing that humans can bring, is that we've cultivated with the earth. And so this was, again, a great opportunity for us to get back to that way of being able to work with the earth and be in harmony in that way and cultivate things. We have that in our DNA. So it's time we continue to do that. And another key area is the pollinators, and looking at how pollinators help bring food to life. And so that's something that we recognize, well, we need to support the pollinators and have food for them. And so planting milkweed for the monarch butterflies and different types of flowers. And so we are providing webinars and educational resources so people know what kinds of plants are good for the pollinators and different kinds of pollinators, as well as when is the best time to plant for them, and then creating ways of working with schools and the youth, the library, and wineries up in Northern California to have bee-friendly wine and all sorts of things that can involve people on different levels so they can participate in this in one way or another. And the education starts to come in through lots of other avenues. And so that's really kind of our key of how we work. River cleanups is another great thing that's been getting going. The cleaner it is, the greener it is. And as I had mentioned, there's been a lot of burned areas with the forest fires. So we're working on some reforestation on that, especially planting native species. Next slide, please. So just kind of pointing out a couple of dates coming up. This weekend is when there's a big river cleanup in Northern California. So if you're interested, I can get you more information. April 22nd is Earth Day. So that's a great day to be getting your plants in the ground if you haven't already. And we have a lot of projects going on that day. June 5th is World Environment Day, and great day to celebrate kinds of different things, lots of organizations getting behind that. And then September 29th is another World Cleanup Day. So a good day to do a river cleanup or just kind of clean up the area. Next slide. So something that we do, we organize, we act like little bees ourselves. And so Aryana Solutions provides webinars, how-to guides and videos, website of resources, and a template for project development if you want to do any of these kind of things moving forward. Next slide. And I mentioned we do the webinars, and we're going to be going deeper into different types of tree species and pollinators especially. Next slide. So we're now going to dive into Nepal, and this is an incredible place. One reason why we chose to work in Nepal is because there was a big earthquake that really affected a lot of the infrastructure, and there was a community up in the foothills of the Himalayas that was asking for some support. And so as we went out there, we identified that they could use some support in agriculture, especially. So we did a lot of agriculture trainings. Next slide. And one issue also is that a lot of the people, especially men, leave for months on end to get temporary jobs to be able to, bring some income into the family and the community. And many times they'll leave school early, so they'll go start taking on jobs as a teenager, or sometimes the women will get pregnant as a teenager, and thus that stops the education opportunities. And so there's very low education and literacy rates and critical thinking skills to kind of help them move forward. So next slide. And some more challenges is after the earthquake, it's just been so much time and effort to try and clean things up. And it's been the culture has been deteriorating and disappearing over time. And so they want to find some way to be more resilient in where they're living. Next slide. So we focused on 3 areas primarily: sustainable agriculture, helping them develop a cooperative, and focusing on education and leadership skills. Next slide. We partnered with a local Nepali-based and owned organization called ICA, the Institute for Cultural Affairs, and they've been doing community-based work and sustainability work for 20 years, and they also focus on training and participatory learning. So really great kind of relationship built, same kind of philosophy. So it's very important to us to always have a local partner to help with the implementation and to really understand the culture and work with the people in a way that is going to be a good fit. Next slide. So within our agriculture program, we focus specifically on shiitake mushroom farming. That's something that the community was very interested in. It's been a growing trend in that area, and it can also bring in a lot of revenue as well as highly nutritious. Next slide. And the women really wanted to learn how to weave again, and so this is a picture of one of those workshops. Next slide. And this is just one of our workshops where we're doing some of the educational pieces and helping them form a cooperative. Next. So this is how we work, how all the different pieces kind of connect and fit together. We work on women's empowerment, leadership training, and the more the women are empowered, the more that they can bring and also help raise the economy, especially when men are gone, but also more so sustainable skills to help them be self-sustaining. And so there's a lot of skill sharing going on, agriculture training, and looking at different, diversifying what they grow, and helping them form a more sustainable future. Next. What was very cool is we started with one village and it ended up blossoming out to 3 villages. And so the impact of the work just kept on growing. Next slide. And the community really wants to build a community center as well as an agriculture cold storage area. So that'll help with transportation, bringing things to market. And so that's something that we'll be working on as far as some of the next steps. Next slide. Moving into Uganda, this is an area that we started off a project on solar cookers and planting fruit trees. And now we're going to be moving deeper into permaculture training and working with the schools to help improve their education systems. Next slide. So the way people cook in Uganda primarily is by wood-fired stoves. And so they're burning a lot of wood, which creates a lot of smoke that they're breathing in, and that's unhealthy. And also it helps create deforestation. Next. And this is just a example of what happens because they go out into the forest to log down a bunch of wood to cook on and use at the school cook stoves as well as in home. And so they actually are purchasing the wood, not just going out and cutting it down, because it's entities that cut down a bunch of wood, and then they come to the communities and the schools and they sell it. Next slide. So what's happening now is they're using these solar cookers and they're not cutting down so many trees, and they're able to save that money that they would have been using to purchase the trees for burning. And now they're able to save $18,000, and they can bring that back into the schools and purchase updated books and different things. And it's saving a lot of carbon. Next slide. And the other piece, as I mentioned, we've been helping them plant fruit trees and strengthening their agriculture skills and also entrepreneurship. And so this is an area where, again, we're helping them be self-sustaining by learning greater skills in how to grow food. Next. Key piece that we're working on is water systems. And as we've been talking about water systems, we've identified a greater need because they were talking about when the dry season comes, they're really worried that the fruit trees that we planted with them won't have water or food to be able to grow. And so I said, well, let's talk about how can we harvest the water in the wet season and be able to use it in the dry season. And then also, what is your soil like? How can we work with you to help retain water in the soil and improve your soil? And so it's blossomed into a whole permaculture conversation. And now we'll be doing a permaculture training with the schools and the teachers there. Next slide. So just to recap on that, we're helping them save cash for being able to bring that back to the schools. We're strengthening agriculture and also entrepreneurship opportunities, and reducing carbon and deforestation. Next slide. We've been working with 3 schools, and then those schools go work with their communities, and it's kind of like a train the trainer system and their families. And so the work is just multiplying and affecting more people. Next. So wrapping up here, just kind of bringing it back home. This is the community we worked with in Nepal, a little bird's eye view. This is where their home is. And we recognize that building health and sustainability, it's a long-term process. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes years, and it takes time for people to learn the skills as they're, just doing their day-to-day livelihoods, and working with the communities and working on the planning and the training and all the phases of the cycle. We always work in partnership, and we see that as a way to accelerate the global shift towards sustainability that we really want. And we've been working in localization, one community at a time. Next slide. So here is our information, and I'll pop our email into the chat here, or our website, aryanyasolutions.com. And you know, if you feel like making a donation, you're welcome to. And you know, really, this is for all generations, but really helping the youth from the ground up and getting involved in that way. So, thank you very much. We're always available to help organize, as you saw on the last slide there. So I'd be available for any questions. And I know that there's a bit of a system here, so I'll pass it back to you all, Lily and Emily and Ava.
Yay, okay, so now we can have a Q&A. Doesn't seem like there are so many people in attendance, but that's okay. We all can just come up with questions. So I can start. I was just wondering from both of you if you have seen, like in the long term, how your work has impacted communities, and if you've seen like tangible solutions in the long run. And if you have any specific examples, I would love to hear them.
Well, I guess I'll start. So yes, definitely. And, you know, it was interesting in Nepal, I saw both a major challenge from climate change, where there was a massive snowstorm in March, which is usually the warm month, and it's starting to warm up by then. And we had built some greenhouses, and the snowstorm was so massive, it took down the greenhouses. So we learned we had to like rebuild with stronger plastic or glass even. And now the community has been able to grow a lot more tomatoes and bring them to market, as well as have more for home, and just a lot happier with the whole process. And some of them are keeping their shiitake mushroom logs in there as well.
Tugi, if you guys have any examples, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, sure, I can go. So some things in the long term, I mean, I would say that like starting a garden, I feel like people think of it as like a short term kind of thing. Like you start a garden, you do it for a season, and then you're kind of done. And then I feel like some people, it's kind of sometimes like a phase, like, oh, you start a garden and you do it for the season, and then after the season's over, you kind of just stop. But I think that if you do it correctly, you can be a year-long thing, it can be a sustainable thing, it can be something that you continuously do all year round. And especially with container gardening, that's why, like, especially if you live in an area like I do, where you can't have a garden outside all year long because it just gets too cold, we really recommend container gardening, because you can then bring your garden inside and still continuously have that sustainable source of sometimes of food for yourself all year round. And you're also in that process just reducing your carbon footprint by so much just by starting your own garden. And it's really rewarding as well to be able to eat your own produce that you're growing in your house, that you put in all of this effort towards.
I have a quick question for Katrina. I'm curious if you grapple with being like a organization from the US working in communities around the world, and if you see your work as extractive in any way.
No, I really appreciate that question. It's something that we really put a lot of effort into because we don't believe in the colonial mindset, and something that we we partner with the community. We don't just come in and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We always work with them, and we work with partners who are in the local area as well. And so we really spend a lot of time getting to know who we're working with, and letting the community lead, because this is their space. And we also recognize our privilege of being from the States, and we use that to be able to raise funds and bring greater awareness to things. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, thanks. Curious if any folks on your team, what the thoughts were behind the name Aryana, as a follow-up to that.
Yeah, so the name means abundant forest in Sanskrit, and so it's really important for us to, as many ways as possible, to bring people's attention back to the environment, and to think about ways that they can incorporate and be part of the environment, thinking like an ecosystem. And so something that we chose to have that in the name. It was a bit clever. So people will ask the question and then be like, oh, great opportunity to talk about the environment here,
I have a quick question for both of you. I was just wondering how COVID has impacted your work. I mean, I know at Aryana Solutions, you guys definitely traveled a lot, so there's that, but how else has that just impacted your work at Aryana and Toolkit?
Yeah, I'll take it first, and would love to hear from Toolkit. It really deeply impacted us, because we were really gearing up to work with Nepal, especially on the community center. And there's a lot of different ideas that have been going around. Fortunately, our local partners have been able to make a couple site visits up there and work with the community and hear what they want to do. And so things are moving forward. But it was, everything went on pause. We worried a lot because we had just done all this work to help the communities, they, get to market, and then markets shut down. And so it for everybody, it's just been challenging, but we really worried a lot about that in particular. And in Uganda, the communities that we're working with, this primarily based around schools, and the schools also shut down. And so the teachers we've been working with have been having a really hard run of it. Fortunately, the schools gave some land for the teachers to use for growing food and sustain themselves a bit more that way, which was very cool. But that's also where we learned that the teachers don't really know how to grow food. In fact, I quote one of them, she says, "I'm a teacher, not a farmer." So we also saw that as a great opportunity for a permaculture training, and said, all right, well, let's look at some ways that people can learn how to grow food, and look at where have you been learning thus far, and what's helpful, what's harmful, and where can we be most helpful. And so we've been working with some local Ugandan permaculture trainers, and they've been going out and making some site visits, and we've developed a curriculum. And so we'll be fundraising for that program here pretty soon, but we're just kind of finalizing and doing soil samples and really doing a deep dive to make sure we work well with them. But it's been really challenging, and for us as an organization, we've had to kind of pivot and say, well, let's, it's not really possible for us to travel right now. Let's focus more here in the local area. And what are some easy, I wouldn't just say easy, but what are some ways that we can support people to, get inspired to grow their own food? So hence Earth Day.
Yeah, and I'll take this one for Toolkit. Well, it's actually really funny that Katrina mentions that, because we've almost had the opposite effect. We've actually been able to grow a lot internationally during the pandemic, and especially, I think we all see this kind of rise in the youth movement of like environmental youth action, and we've really been able to catalyze on a lot of the work that's being done there. So For example, we just started a school gardening program in Kenya, so we have a lot of similar examples of what you guys are doing in Uganda. We're working with multiple schools in Kenya and building gardens right now. And even though some of the schools are like reopening up right now, we're developing a curriculum and doing a lot of work there. We're starting a new project in Tanzania soon. So we've really been able to use this time and spread our presence internationally, work on a lot of stuff virtually, and every city that we work with, since we do have such a large chapter base, is a little bit different. But some of our chapters have still been able to do incredible work. We just launched several global chapter projects, both a virtual version and in-person version. A lot of our chapters have been able to do these in-person garden drives, if that is plausible in their city, which has been really amazing. And now they're starting their seedlings and starting their gardens for the spring. And a lot of our chapters that are still in that virtual setting are still planning and then now organizing what they're going to be doing this month, both constructing and planning for the garden. So I think, I mean, COVID, of course, has taken a hindrance on everyone's work. Like, I don't think anyone has not been affected by it, but it is really incredible to just see how many environmental activists are still plowing ahead, even with.
I guess I'll just add to that. I totally agree in the sense that, like, I think some organizations, it's really hard for them to like deal with COVID, and for others it's been, I mean, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying, like, the mobilizing team, we formed during COVID, so it was like we kind of came together to make this organization. The us mobilizing team, we've really we've made actually a pretty big impact, because we started a podcast, and I'm currently fighting a gas station in my town. It's been wild time. But I guess I actually have a question, and I was wondering, do you guys think, like, we as the world, or maybe even just as a country right now, just considering, like, are we heading in the right direction with this? Are we making the right decisions? And that's kind of my question to you guys, like, what your thoughts on the future are. I guess it's a big question, but if you have an answer, let me know.
Sure, I can start on this one again. I would say that in terms of what's going on, I think we see a lot of positive changes, and I think we see a lot of us moving towards the right direction. Do I think we're making enough impact right now? That's really the magnitude of like what we need to be at in terms of like climate action. Like, no, I don't think so. But I think just seeing so many young people, even now, being more interested and invested in what's going on with the climate, I think that's really reassuring. I think a lot of what we're doing, both our organizations today, I think is really incredible. And it just goes to show that there's so much to do when it comes to the climate movement. So it's not just reducing, reusing, recycling. It's not just the gardening that we're talking about today. It's really intertwined into so many different like factors and like areas. So if you, for example, you're interested in fashion and like sustainability and goods in that way, like you can get involved there. So I think it's all about like a result of personal action, in addition to us still encouraging and trying to persuade a lot of corporations and organizations to take a larger stance on what's going on. But I do see like hope, I guess, to answer your question. But I do think like we need to take more action like right now.
Yeah, such a great question. And oh goodness, there's so many different ways things are going and have gone. And you know, I have lots of different thoughts to this question. And the answer can definitely go in a lot of different directions. And you know, it's definitely one that, you know, we'd have to have some tea and have a much longer discussion to really go into all the different aspects. But you know, as building off of what Megan was just saying, there's opportunity for some massive scale shifts for things to like really happen. And, you know, that's why I was looking at the Rotary Network and as kind of like, okay, who can we work with who isn't who would not be like normally thought of, you know, like who can be activated in a way that there could also be massive change. So that's one route, you know, and then there's the individual route, and then there's, like as Megan was saying, the corporate level, and there's a lot to that in particular. And I have mixed feelings around that, to be quite honest, because I used to work at a corporation. I worked at Disney and helped write environmental policies, you know, company wide. So it was an international kind of thing that we were doing. And there was a lot of great things that moved forward. We had a lot of partnerships with different organizations, and as well as like, you know, internally, externally, policy level, working with lawyers, you know, all the theme camps and the, gosh, the magazines like ESPN, the TV stations, the movie, it was crazy. Long story short is I saw that, you know, the CEO and the, you know, leadership team over time started to change the term policy into guideline, and it started to get watered down over the years, and it made me really sad to see. And I just wasn't in a position where I could, you know, go bang on the door and be like, what are you guys doing? They go in the wrong direction, you know. It's a, and I actually, you know, kind of wish that maybe I did, but the Rainforest Action Network did do that. They did bang on the door, and it did get the attention of the CEO. And that's when things started on a good note. But like I said, over time, it still went downhill. And so holding the corporations accountable is a really important piece that does help keep that needle moving forward, and really, you know, will affect the status quo. And so working with large organizations like the Rainforest Action Network and WWF and all sorts of organizations. I think 350 is a good one for that too, to really like help move that needle and band together and create coalitions and be creative on different ways to get the attention and bang on the door. You know, even though a lot of corporations are moving forward, it's still not enough. You know, there's a lot of issues, and a lot of it also comes at policy from the outside in. And so with some of the plastic issues, something we can do to get behind that is working on the consumer responsibility, or I'm sorry, not consumer, the product responsibility. So the manufacturers who are making the products, they need to be responsible for the end of life of the cycle. And so holding them accountable and working with lots of different institutions. There's the Plastic Pollution Coalition, and I know here in Oregon, there's a state level committee that is working on making statewide policies and initiatives to hold the manufacturers responsible. And so I think banding together to really like help leverage those things, that's where some change can be made. So lots of different levels people can play on. All are good. Some are going to have greater impact than others. Some are going to, you know, feel like you're banging your head against a wall more than others. Some are going to feel more rewarding, but all of them are needed. And just depends on where your skill set and interests are.
Yeah, I'm definitely on the same page as both of you. I think there's great hope within the next few years of things that we can do, but it's going to be a lot of work. So I just wanted to say, Toogie, I loved your guys's connection, your presentation connection with the idea that people, you know, climate change is about people. It's not about, oh, is this planet going to survive? Because it's going to be here whether we're here or not. So I think people really need to get that perspective, and I think that was a great part of your presentation. And then Katrina, with your I loved your incredible stories. Like, it's like everything you talk about has some sort of like, I don't know, your stories about like, all the different locations that you're helping, and just hearing you work at Disney and like your transformation is just really incredible, because I think it makes it more relatable to the everyday person. It's like I work this, but I still focus on making a difference. So I love that. My last question to both of you guys would be, what would you say to like the youth who want to become farmers, or even just dipping their toes into this kind of field? Because I think it's one that's really hard, and there's not a lot of incentive to do it. So that's my last question.
Yeah. I say go try it out. Go live on a farm. Go through a farm training. I know Kiss the Ground has some farm trainings. I was working with Starhawk on a regenerative land management training. There's lots of really great resources. Figure out what kind of farming you want to do. If you want to do ranching, if you want to do farming of a certain type of thing. Don't suggest monocropping, but Nick just posted Farming While Black is a great book to read. Good call. Check out different farmer networks and sustainable agriculture networks. And really, I think most people in any of those networks, if you just reach out, will be supportive, be a mentor, help open doors, and be creative on different ways to bring in income while farming, because it doesn't always have great yields, but then sometimes it does, and regenerative farming is definitely a growing trend. And so just make sure you do your research and you do it right.
And then I can go as well. So this is just like pretty much piggybacking off of what Katrina said here. But I feel like when people think of farming, especially in the US at least, they think of it as just like monoculture, really. Like they just think, oh, we're gonna be out, we're gonna be growing like one thing for acres and acres. So, like it's just gonna be a bunch of corn for acres and acres, but that's really not all there is to it. It can be a lot more exciting and a lot more interesting if you really delve yourself into the parts of agriculture that you're personally interested in. Like personally, for me at least, I'm really interested in like integrated pest management systems, and like trying to figure out what the best way to get rid of pests in when you're farming, rather than just using pesticides and herbicides to just kill off everything. So just try to find what topic you're passionate about, and then really building your skills in that. And I think that you can end up in a really good position for yourself and doing something that you're both passionate about and also helping the environment in the process. So it's like a win-win for you. And then also at the same time, you're helping everyone by growing food a little bit more sustainably.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your amazing input on everything. Do we have any last questions from anyone? No? All right. Lily, do you want to go ahead and introduce our toolkit?
Yeah, so the team and I, we've put together a toolkit of things. If you are interested in learning more about sustainable agriculture practices and food justice, then you can go to the link that Ava has put in the chat. We will be sharing it out via email, and we're going to be spreading this to local schools and other organizations such as ours, such as like the Sunrise Movement, and we're going to try to get other young people involved in learning more about this topic. So I appreciate everyone being here, and I hope you guys can take action and learn something from each other. And yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for having us and for putting this on and organizing. And you all are welcome to participate in anything we have going on. We're planning to do a lot more sustainability style workshops up in Santa Rosa on a farm that we're partnering with. So if you're interested in that, then let me know. And you've got my email, but I'll put it in the chat just in case. And the farm is called Blue Dot Farm in Santa Rosa.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us. We're excited to stay in touch and hopefully collaborate on more projects later down the line. It is getting pretty late here Eastern time, so I'm going to jump off, but really great talking with everyone today. And then Helena or Priya, if you guys could put our email in the chat or something, that'd be great. Or like website, I guess, but yep. Have a great night, everyone.